Friday afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Kare 11 News Now. I'm Chris Harapsky. This afternoon, our top story follows preparations for high-level talks between the U.S. and Iran this weekend. Right now, Vice President J.D. Vance is on his way to Pakistan, where he will be joined by other members of the U.S. negotiation team, including President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. Ahead of the departure, Vance said that he thinks negotiations with Iran are going to be positive. This comes as a 2-week ceasefire is on shaky ground.
If the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The president has gave us some pretty clear guidelines.
The reopening of the Strait of Hormuz will be one of the most pressing issues during the negotiations. President Trump has accused Iran of not holding up their side of the 2-week ceasefire agreement. Since the war began, very few ships have been allowed through this critical pathway for the world's supply of oil, sending prices soaring. Right now, there's already some tension heading into the weekend. That's caused by Israel's attacks on the Iranian-based Hezbollah in Lebanon, north of Israel. Iran says that violated the terms of the ceasefire, while the U.S. argues Lebanon was never part of the agreement. New numbers today show the U.S. saw the fastest inflation rates last month that we've seen in years. March brought the largest monthly jump in gas prices in 6 decades. The sharp increase in inflation pushes the country further from the Fed's 2% target. Experts say that means the central bank will almost certainly delay rate cuts for months. Day one of the Freedom to Breathe here at home. It's a hunger strike that is now underway in North Minneapolis. Activists are pushing for the closure of Hennepin Energy Recovery Center. It's known as the HERC. It burns about 365,000 tons of garbage a year. And activists say it's bad for public health and the climate. The group is demanding a public vote to close the HERC by the end of 2027. Today, we could see a veto from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, as he promised yesterday, on a city council decision not to reappoint Community Safety Commissioner Todd Barnett. Progressive members of the council criticized Barnett's handling of the budget, MPD, and the handling of some high-profile cases, including the shooting of Davis Maturi by his neighbor, plus domestic violence cases involving the deaths of Allison Lucier and Mariah Samuels. Even if Frey vetoes the decision, the council could vote to override it with a supermajority. The council would need 9 votes for that. That's 2 more than the vote not to reappoint Barnett. If that doesn't happen, the city attorney is currently reviewing what happens next with Barnett's position. Right now, the Artemis 2 crew is just hours away from splashing down to Earth, finishing a historic 10-day trip around the moon. The crew will be barreling back to Earth at about 25,000 miles per hour before splashing down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego. That's expected shortly after 7 o'clock Central Time tonight. Brooke Martell has the latest.
The USS John P. Murtha has been out in the Pacific since the start of this week, and this naval ship really plays an integral role in the recovery. But you can imagine the anticipation, not just here in San Diego, but really around the globe as we wait for the Orion spacecraft to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, parachutes deployed to bring the astronauts safely back to Earth. And NASA says once this mission is complete, that the Orion spacecraft will have traveled nearly 700,000 miles. And at the start of this week, you'll recall the 7-hour lunar flyby that marked the first return to the moon since Apollo 17 in 1972. And that leg of the journey provided a look at the moon's far side and set a new record for human spaceflight. And now the crew is on their way home. Early this evening, before it re-enters Earth's atmosphere, NASA says there will be a 6-minute communication blackout with the astronauts. But once it's regained, a series of parachute deployments will begin, bringing the capsule down to a speed of nearly 20 miles per hour before splashdown. And within 2 hours of splashing down, Navy divers and medical personnel will be some of the first to make contact with the astronauts to get them out of the capsule, hoisted onto Navy helicopters, and they'll then be flown back to the USS John P. Murtha for further medical evaluations. And NASA says once they're cleared from that, they'll be flown back here, where they're expected to board a plane to Houston to take them back to NASA's Johnson Space Center. In San Diego, I'm Brooke Martell. Back to you.
Developing right now, a judge has put the federal government on deadline to release documents related to the deadly shooting of Renee Good. But the evidence It's actually part of a separate case. A few months before ICE agent Jonathan Ross shot and killed Good, he was dragged by a car during a different scene in an attempted arrest. Roberto Carlos Munoz Guatemala was driving that car. He was found guilty in December. His attorney says Ross was aggressive in his client's case and there was no body cameras to show those interactions. He says that files related to Good's death could help his client.
Well, anything that's in a court filing is available to the public. And so if there's information that ultimately the magistrate and the court release to me, and I use that either in a motion for a new trial or in a sentencing argument, that information is all publicly available. So that information would be available to the public and certainly to the prosecutors.
Kind of reiterating what he said, the new information could potentially result in a motion for a new trial for his client, or that case being dismissed altogether if the government doesn't want to release those files. Right now, we're learning that small businesses at the largest Latino shopping center in Minneapolis, Plaza Mexico, could be facing closure because of Operation Metro Surge, they say. They're holding a press conference today to share the impact and urge lawmakers to pass relief legislation. Somali business owners from Carmel Mall will also join them. Well, the last remaining defendant in a family of feeding our future suspects has pleaded guilty. It's Gandhi Muhammad. Took a plea deal, adding a few extra months of prison time, but prosecutors promised to not prosecute Muhammad for any other crimes that they're investigating. That is a major concession because he's been involved with companies billing multiple Medicaid programs. Right now at the state capitol, lawmakers are focusing on what are called prediction markets. It is a form of betting that has exploded in popularity recently, and at this time, they're regulated by the federal government and not by the states. But in Minnesota, some lawmakers say it's time to ban them. Here's Danny Spiewak.
From the war in Iran to elections to sports, prediction markets are places where you can bet on the outcome of future events. Just this week, some users made hundreds of thousands of dollars after accurately predicting a ceasefire in the Middle East. And at this very moment, on the platform Kalshi, you can put money on anything from this weekend's Twins-Blue Jays series to who will be Trump's next attorney general.
As you can see with prediction markets, stuff pops up that wasn't even on the radar before.
Joshua Schuer, chair of sport management at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut, says states are scrambling to keep up with prediction markets. Since they're regulated federally, prediction markets are available in all 50 states, even Minnesota, where online sports gambling is still illegal.
That's why I think you really have to think this stuff out and look at all the different angles.
This session, there's a bipartisan push at the Minnesota State Capitol to regulate prediction markets. Both the House and Senate heard bills in committee Thursday that would ban them entirely.
Prediction markets are coming in here and basically saying, we're legal, you can bet on anything you want, anytime you want. And there are some horrendous examples of how that's happening.
Although DFL Senator John Marty believes this activity should already be illegal under current law, he sponsors a bill that would explicitly make it a felony to use or operate a prediction market in Minnesota. Co-sponsors include Republican Jordan Rasmussen and Democrat Aaron May Quaid, who raised concerns about people trading insider information to win money.
It's also just a really, really bad thing for society, and we've seen that play out, and so I'm very, very glad that we'll have a chance to keep this from happening in Minnesota.
But the platforms themselves say they've tightened their protocols lately, with Kalshi stating on its website, "We proactively screen to prevent insider trading." The companies also argue that they provide a public service by gauging public opinion of major events. For a ban on prediction markets to pass in Minnesota, though, the legislation also needs to move through the tied House, where GOP leadership says that's questionable after the bill missed deadline to get out of committee.
That's one of several bills that folks have come to us with very late in the process.
The Senate also heard a bill in committee today that would ban online sweepstakes games. That's another bill where there are bipartisan sponsors in both the Senate and the House, but whether it passes this session will depend on cooperation between the chambers and some careful negotiation. At the Capitol, I'm Danny Spiewak, Kare 11 News.
State lawmakers are running out of time to pass their bills. The legislative deadline is May 18th. If you have not filed your taxes yet, this is your last weekend to do it before Wednesday's deadline. But if you need more time, you can always file for a 6-month extension. That request must be submitted before still tax day, April 15th. Any money you owe the IRS must be paid by then as well.
Don't misunderstand extension. It's just an extension to send in paperwork federally and your state.
If you don't pay the IRS on time, you'll face a late penalty of 7% interest on the money that you owe. If you need a professional to help, it's not too late to ask. Most big tax services have extra staff through the 15th to help you file on time. Big news this afternoon from the WNBA. The league just approved adding 3 new teams. They're coming to Cleveland, Detroit, and Philly. They'll roll out in that order, 1 each year, starting in 2028. They follow both the Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire, 2 teams starting their inaugural seasons in less than a month. Stick with us. We got more news and weather. It's coming up after the break.